NFL free agency is always exciting. Fans and analysts spend months talking about which big-name players will sign new deals. But here's something funny. Everyone is so focused on free agents that they forget one thing. What about the players who might get cut and then become free agents? That's what today's video is all about. There are a few players who could be released soon. Some of them were even starters. And one team that might be interested? The Denver Broncos. Now, let's talk about the first player on our list. He's not a starter anymore, but at one time, he was a rising star. I'm talking about Panthers running back Miles Sanders. Remember when Sanders had that amazing season with the Eagles? He ran behind a powerful offensive line, racked up over 1,000 yards and scored 11 touchdowns. That performance got him a big contract with the Carolina Panthers. But things didn't go as planned. Once he arrived in Carolina, he dropped down the depth chart fast. In 2023, he barely made an impact. Just 205 yards on 55 carries. That's all. Meanwhile, Chuba Hubbard took over as the Panthers' top running back and even got a contract extension. Plus, the team had Jonathan Brooks, a second-round pick, though injuries slowed him down. With all this competition, it's no surprise that the Panthers might move on from Sanders. It was just a bad investment, and they could save some money by letting him go. So, what's next for him? Could he get another shot with a new team? That's the big question. Could a star tight end be on the way out? In the NFL, sometimes it's not just about salary caps. It's about the future. If a player no longer fits a team's plans, why keep him around? That's exactly the case with Mark Andrews and the Baltimore Ravens. Andrews has been a huge part of Baltimore's offense for years. But now, his future with the team is looking shaky. Here's why. Andrews carries a $16 million cap hit, and if the Ravens release him, they save $11 million. That's a big number, and while one playoff game won't decide his fate, it's clear that last season, Isaiah likely started looking like the team's new TE1. Of course, let's not pretend Andrews was invisible. He still put up 11 touchdowns, and you don't just stumble into that kind of production, unless you're Jamal Williams in his Detroit days. Now, this is where things get even more interesting. The Denver Broncos are desperate for a tight end. Last season, their tight end group was historically bad. I mean, if there's a record for the worst tight end production in NFL history, the 2024 Broncos might own it. So, if Andrews becomes available, should the Broncos make a move? Maybe. But there's another thing to consider: the Patriots' strategy. Bill Belichick always believed in cutting players 1 year too early rather than 1 year too late. Could the Ravens be thinking the same thing with Andrews? If Baltimore feels they've already gotten the best out of him, we could see a shocking cut. And if that happens, expect teams to line up for one of the league's best tight ends. Could these defensive stars be on the move? If the Broncos want to upgrade their offense, Mark Andrews could be a great fit. He wouldn't stop them from drafting a young tight end, but at 29 years old, he could instantly improve their red zone attack. Denver wasn't bad in the red zone last season, but let's be honest, there's always room for improvement. But now, let's shift gears to defense. Next up, we have Jalen Thompson, a name that might not be huge in the NFL world, but make no mistake, he's a quality starting safety for the Arizona Cardinals. According to Pro Football Focus, he ranked 32nd out of 98 safeties last season. That's solid. He's not flashy, but he makes big plays and brings value to any defense. Now, here's where it gets interesting. If Arizona releases Thompson after June 1st, they save $6.6 million in cap space. That's a big chunk of change. And let's be real, Arizona's defense isn't exactly in rebuild mode because, well, that would mean they had something strong to begin with. Instead, they're looking to get younger and spend money in other areas. Plus, there's a connection here. Thompson played under Vance Joseph, and we've already seen Zach Allen follow Joseph to Denver. So, could another former Cardinal make the jump? The Broncos need help at safety. Brandon Jones was decent last year, but let's be honest. He played exactly like what the Broncos paid for, an average safety. If they want to upgrade, Thompson could be a sneaky good addition to the roster. With free agency and roster cuts looming, things are about to get very interesting. Could a veteran corner be the missing piece for Denver? The Broncos' secondary had some solid moments last season, but depth is still a major issue, especially at safety. P.J. Locke and the backups? Big thumbs down. If Denver wants to strengthen its defense, they'll need to look at free agency or the draft to bring in reinforcements. Now, let's talk about a name that could soon hit the market: Darius Slay. Before we go any further, no, the Broncos wouldn't sign Slay to be their starting cornerback. Riley Moss at CB2 and Jaquan McMillan in the slot? That's a strong duo, but Slay could bring something just as valuable: experience. At 33 years old, Slay isn't the shutdown corner he once was, but he still has plenty of football left in the tank. Think about Patrick Peterson in his later years. Once a pure corner, but later used in a hybrid corner safety role. That's the type of impact Slay could have in Denver. He wouldn't be brought in to start, but to add veteran leadership, depth, and playoff experience to a young and developing secondary. And let's be real, when you're trying to build a contender, having a player with big game experience can be a game changer. So, could Slay land in Denver? Maybe. If the right opportunity and price come along, don't be surprised if the Broncos take a serious look. Could Christian Kirk be the next big cut? So, we've talked about depth, experience, and veteran leadership. Now let's shift gears to a wide receiver who might be on the chopping block. Christian Kirk. Remember when Jacksonville gave him that massive contract and everyone was scratching their heads like, what are the Jags thinking? Well, turns out those concerns weren't entirely wrong. Kirk hasn't been a complete bust. When he's on the field, he's actually produced well. The problem? He just hasn't been on the field enough. Injuries have kept him sidelined, and last season, he only managed 379 yards in 8 games. It's frustrating because we've seen his talent. Back in his Arizona days, he was a promising young receiver. Jacksonville bet big on him, but now? That contract looks like an overpay. So what happens next? If the Jaguars decide to move on, Kirk could be one of the biggest surprise cuts of the offseason. A healthy Kirk can still be a game changer, but teams will have to decide. Is he worth the risk? Would he be a fit in Denver? That's another question entirely. But keep an eye on him, because if he gets released, he won't be without a team for long. Or Christian Kirk, the most likely cut? If there's one player on this list almost guaranteed to be cut, it's Christian Kirk. Why? Simple. He's only had one 1,000-yard season in his entire career, and that was back in his first year with Jacksonville. Since then, injuries have kept him off the field. He played 12 games in 2023, only 8 in 2024, and now the Jaguars have a choice to make. With $10.4 million in potential cap savings, keeping him just doesn't make sense. He hasn't been a bad player, but he also hasn't been great enough for Jacksonville to justify that price tag. So what's next?